This machine talks. Listen or lose it all.
You're done, Janitor. Prove it or get out.
You ever have one of those moments where you just know you're about to witness something that'll change everything? Like, you're standing there, heart pounding, watching a train wreck unfold, and then Bumsummione steps up and flips the whole damn script? That's exactly what went down at Apex Dynamics, right here in Seattle, on a day that started with a $50 million dream exploding into a pile of twisted metal and ended with a janitor, of all people, teaching a cocky CEO a lesson he'd never forget. It was a crisp October morning, the kind where the air smells like rain and ambition, and Apex's factory floor was buzzing with nervous energy. 200 employees, a dozen investors in tailored suits, and a pack of tech reporters with cameras ready to immortalize the moment. It was all set up for the big reveal of Apex's game changer, a prototype engine called the Helix. This thing wasn't just a machine. It was the heart of a $12 billion IPO, a fusion of AI and mechanical wizardry that promised to revolutionize everything from automated factories to deep space probes. The blogs were calling it the Tesla of robotics, and the pre-orders were already north of $900 million. For James Carter, the 39-year-old CEO who'd built Apex from a garage startup to a Wall Street darling, this was his moment to cement his name among the tech gods. Think Elon Musk, but with better hair and a sharper suit. James stood center stage, his polished smile practically glowing under the spotlights, as he hyped up the Helix like it was his firstborn. The platform was decked out like a sci-fi movie, set sleek titanium components gleaming, LED screens flashing data that screamed future. His voice carried that perfect mix of confidence and charm, the kind that makes investors reach for their checkbooks. This, he said, pointing at the Helix, is disruption in motion. The crowd ate it up, nodding, whispering, already imagining their stock portfolios doubling. But machines, they don't care about your TED Talk charisma or your IPO dreams. They've got their own language, and if you don't listen, they'll scream. See, the Helix had been acting up all week. Monday, the cooling system started flickering. Nothing major, just a blip, the kind of thing engineers shrug off as tweakable. By Tuesday, those blips were full-on spasms, shaking the test rig like a bad case of the hiccups. By Wednesday night, with investors flying in from Tokyo, Dubai, and New York, the Helix suffered what the engineers called, in their polite, PhD way, a catastrophic cascade failure. Translation: the damn thing tore itself apart. $50 million of precision engineering turned into a scrapyard sculpture in under a minute. Sparks flying, alarms screaming, and a cloud of chemical suppressant choking the air like a bad vape cloud. Investors started heading for the exits. Reporters were live tweeting the disaster, and James? He stood there, frozen, watching his billion-dollar empire crumble faster than a stale cookie. That's when his eyes landed on Calvin Reed, the quiet guy in the corner wearing faded navy coveralls, pushing a mop like he didn't have a care in the world. Calvin, 54, had been cleaning Apex's offices for a decade, blending into the background like he was part of the furniture. His name was stitched in simple white thread on his uniform. Nothing flashy, just Calvin. Most folks didn't even notice him except when they needed a spill cleaned up or a trash can emptied. James, desperate to deflect the heat, pointed at him with a smirk that could curdle milk. "Hey, maybe we should ask the janitor to fix it," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "I bet he's got a PhD in quantum robotics." The room went dead quiet, 200 pairs of eyes shifting uncomfortably. It was a cheap shot, the kind of thing you say when you're drowning and want to drag someone else down with you. But here's where it gets good. Calvin didn't flinch, didn't look away, didn't even blink. He just set his mop against the wall, stepped forward, and said, in a voice so calm it gave me chills, "You know, I might have a few thoughts on that." The crowd froze, like they'd just seen a ghost walk through the wall. James' smirk twitched, like he wasn't sure if he'd just been called out or set up for a bigger fall. And Calvin? He was about to show everyone that the guy they'd ignored for years was the only one who could save their asses. Let's rewind a bit, because you need to know who Calvin Reed really is. 30 years ago, he wasn't pushing a mofe. He was Petty Officer First Class Calvin Reed, standing in the belly of the USS Nautilus, a nuclear sub slicing through the Pacific at depths that'd make your skin crawl. At 24, He was the youngest mechanic ever trusted with the Navy's top-secret propulsion systems, the kind of tech so advanced it's still classified today. Down there, 900 feet under the ocean, there's no room for error. A single misstep, a missed vibration, a bad call, and you're not just losing a machinery, losing lives. Calvin learned to listen to machines like they were old friends, picking up on every hum, every clank, every whisper of trouble. His boss, Chief Ortiz, used to say, "Engines talk, Reed. You just gotta hear him." That stuck with him, became his gospel. He spent 15 years in the Navy, troubleshooting reactors and propulsion systems in spaces so tight you couldn't swing a wrench. He'd diagnose problems by literally feeling the vibrations through the hull when million-dollar diagnostics failed. His specialty was integration, making sure the mechanical guts played nice with the electronic brains. But in 2005, during his last tour, he spotted a flaw in a new control system, a tiny glitch that could have sunk an entire fleet under the right conditions. He wrote it up, sent it up the chain, expecting a fix. Instead, he got burned. Someone high up Calvin never found out who decided it was cheaper to bury the problem than admit it. They pinned it on him, accused him of faking reports to look like a hero. The charges didn't stick, but the damage did. His clearance got yanked, his career tanked, and by the time he was cleared, the industry had moved on. Defense contractors saw a gap in his resume and passed him over like yesterday's news. So Calvin ended up at Apex, not because he couldn't do more, but because life doesn't always give you a choice. His dad, Marcus Reed, had Parkinson's, and the medical bills were piling up faster than Calvin could count. Apex offered steady pay, health benefits, and a chance to keep his head down. But he never stopped learning. His beat-up lunchbox held more than sandwiches. It was stuffed with engineering journals, dog-eared manuals on AI integration, and notes he'd scribbled on napkins during breaks. Every night, while mopping the halls, he'd glance at the engineers' whiteboards, see their equations, and think, y'all are missing something. He'd tried offering ideas before, polite suggestions dropped in passing, but they'd always been brushed off. "Thanks, Calvin, but we've got this," they'd say, eyes already back on their screens. So he learned to stay invisible, to listen to the machines instead of the suits. Back to that morning, with the helix in pieces and James' ego hanging by a thread. Calvin's step forward wasn't just a bold move, it was a decade of frustration boiling over, a chance to finally be heard. But it wasn't just him against James. Enter Dr. Lillian Hayes, a 68-year-old legend in mechanical engineering, the kind of woman who designed engines for NASA and the Navy, the kind whose name made grad students sweat. She wasn't supposed to be there, but the board had quietly flown her in to watch the demo, a last-minute audit to make sure James wasn't overselling the helix. When Calvin spoke up, she didn't laugh or roll her eyes. She leaned in, her gray eyes sharp as a hawk's. "Let's hear it, Mr. Reed," she said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "What makes you think you've got something our engineers don't?" James nearly choked, his face cycling through shock, panic, and something like rage. He opened his mouth to protest, but Lillian shot him a look that said, "Sit down, kid." Calvin took a breath, feeling that old Navy calm settle over him, the kind you get when you're troubleshooting a reactor with 200 lives on the line. "Ma'am," he said, "I've been watching this engine for months, cleaning around it, listening to it. The problem isn't the parts, it's how they're talking to each other. The AI's fighting the mechanics because it's misreading vibrations as errors." The engineers exchanged looks, half impressed, half annoyed. How the hell did the janitor know about harmonic resonance? James saw his chance to take back control. "This is absurd," he snapped, his voice tight with desperation. "This is a $50 million machine, not a vacuum cleaner. We're not gambling our future on a janitor's hunch." Lillian didn't even glance at him. "You've already lost your gamble, James," she said coolly. "Your investors are halfway to the airport, and your stock's tanking as we speak. What's left to lose?" The room went quiet again, the truth of her words sinking in. James' face flushed red, but he wasn't stupid. He'd built Apex by knowing when to pivot. "Fine," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You've got 1 hour, Calvin. Fix it, or you're done here." Then he leaned in close, his voice a low hiss. "And if you pull this off, I'll make you head of engineering. But if you fail, everyone's gonna know you're just a mop pusher with a big mouth." The crowd gasped. Head of engineering? That was a $200,000 a year gig, with stock options that could make you a millionaire if Apex survived. Calvin just nodded, calm as ever. I'll take that deal, he said, and the room buzzed with anticipation, like they were watching a high-stakes poker game about to go all in. Calvin didn't waste a second. He grabbed his toolkit beat-up metal box that looked like it belonged in a garage sale, not a high-tech lab. While the engineers had been throwing million-dollar diagnostics at the Helix, Calvin pulled out a $20 multimeter, a mechanical stethoscope, and a cheap LED flashlight. The crowd muttered, skeptical, but Lillian leaned forward, her eyes locked on him like she was seeing something no one else did. First rule, Calvin said, kneeling by the Helix's core, you don't fix what you don't understand. His hands moved over the titanium housing, feeling for vibrations the fancy sensors had missed. The AI's freaking out because it thinks the cooling system's failing, but it's not. It's just picking up harmonic vibrations and reading them as heat spikes. He tapped a pipe with his finger, precise as a surgeon. Right here. The sensor's getting bad data because it wasn't built for a mobile system like this. Dr. Rachel Kim, the lead engineer, stepped up, her face a mix of curiosity and doubt. Those sensors are top grade, she said. They don't just misread vibrations. Calvin handed her his stethoscope, simple as that. Listen for yourself. Rachel hesitated, then pressed the earpieces in. Her eyes widened, like she'd just heard a ghost. There's a pulse, she said, almost to herself. A resonance frequency messing with the readings. Calvin nodded. The AI's trying to fix a problem that isn't there, and it's stressing the whole system into failure. In 10 minutes, with tools you could buy at Home Depot, he'd cracked a puzzle that had stumped a dozen PhDs for 3 days. Next, he moved to the wreckage, picking up a chunk of the Helix's casing that had split like a cracked egg. He held it up to the light, shining his flashlight through it. Rachel, grab me that magnifying glass, he said, not looking up. She did, and the crowd leaned in, phones out, recording every move. Calvin traced the fracture with his finger. This isn't random, he said. Microcracks from bad heat treatment during manufacturing. They're invisible until the vibrations hit just right, then boom, failure. Lillian took the glass, examined it, and nodded slowly. He's right, she said, her voice heavy. These cracks would have slipped through standard inspections. With 20 minutes left, Calvin was at the control terminal, navigating menus like he'd designed the damn thing. The fix isn't new parts, he said, fingers flying. It's teaching the AI to stop fighting the vibrations and work with them. He recalibrated the sensors, tweaking parameters to treat the resonances as normal, not errors. The crowd was silent now, hanging on his every move. With 7 minutes to spare, he hit the startup sequence. The Helix hummed to life, smooth, steady, like it was singing. Temperature gauges settled, pressure readings locked in, and the vibrations? Just a soft ripple, like a heartbeat. Lillian took over for the stress test, ramping the Helix up to the same load that had killed it that morning. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the scream of metal or the wail of alarms. But the Helix just purred, stronger, smoother, hitting performance numbers 25% better than the lab's best day. At the 10-minute mark, Lillian shut it down not because it failed, but because it didn't need to prove anything else. The room exploded in applause, starting with Lillian's slow clap and spreading like wildfire. James stood there, pale as a ghost, watching his company's future get saved by the guy he'd mocked. Lillian turned to Calvin, her voice clear and commanding. I've seen a lot in 40 years, Calvin, but what you just did, that's not just skill, that's genius. She paused, letting it sink in. The board's offering you senior systems engineer, effective now. $180,000 a year, plus equity. The crowd gasped again, but Calvin stayed calm. I'm honored, he said, but I've got one ask. The maintenance crew VE always had my back. They deserve a shot to move up too. Lillian smiled, a real one, not the corporate kind. Done, she said. Talent sees talent. The fallout was brutal for James. 3 days later, the board met, and Lillian laid it all bare, not just Calvin's win, but the toxic culture that had buried his talent for a decade. She had receipts. 19 times Calvin had flagged issues, only to be ignored. Security footage of James' janitor jab went viral, tagged Justice for Calvin. turning him into a poster child for corporate arrogance. The board didn't fire him, they were too smart for that, but they sidelined him to an advisory role, a fancy way of saying he'd collect a paycheck to sit quietly while others ran the show. His $15 million IPO bonus? Gone. His corner office? Calvin's now. 6 months later, Apex was a different place. Calvin's mentorship program had 60 employees, janitors, coders, admins moving into roles that matched their skills. Innovation was up 400%, all because people's ideas were finally heard. The IPO? It didn't just happen. It crushed expectations, making Apex a $14 billion company. Calvin sat in that corner office, work boots still on, reviewing designs for the next Helix. His dad's medical bills paid off, a trust fund set up for his care. But he never stopped listening to the machines, never forgot what it felt like to be invisible. So here's the thing, what do you think? Have you ever written someone off because of their job, their clothes, their accent? Maybe you were the one who got overlooked, waiting for a chance to show what you're made of. Drop it in the comments. Tell me your story, because if Calvin's taught us anything, it's that the quiet ones, the ones nobody sees, might just be the ones who change the game. Share this if you believe everyone deserves a shot, and let's keep this conversation going.